Good day, everyone. Welcome to my presentation. Today, we're going to talk about organizational objectives. But before we proceed to that, let me define first what is objective. We all know that objective is something toward which effort is directed. It can be an aim, goal, or end of action. On the same token, in business activity, objectives may be defined as those ends which the organization seeks to achieve by its existence and operations. Objectives form the basis for the functioning of an organization. Indeed, objectives help define the organization in its environment. Most organizations need to justify their existence to legitimize themselves in the eyes of the government, customers, and society at large. And by stating objectives, they also attract people who identify with the objectives to work for the organization. Thus, objectives define the enterprise. The word objectives broadly used as long-range company aims, more specific department goals, and even individual assignments. Thus, objectives may pertain to a wide or narrow part of an enterprise, and they may be either long or short range. A goal is defined as an intermediate result to be achieved by a certain time as part of the grand plan. A plan can therefore have many goals. Specific goals are sometimes referred to as targets. For example, the sales target for a particular year or territory. Goals should be measurable, quantitative, challenging, realistic, consistent, and prioritized. If you are familiar with five setting goals or what we call SMART goals developed by George Doran and James Cunningham in their 1981 article, SMART Weight Management Goals and Objectives, which is the acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound, that it is still the prevalent process for setting goals and objectives today. Now let's proceed to our main topic, the organizational objectives, are short-term and medium-term goals that an organization seeks to accomplish. An organization's objectives will play a large part in developing organizational policies and determining the allocation of organizational resources. Achievement of objectives helps an organization reach its overall strategic goals. Importance of an organizational objectives. The following points elucidate the importance of or usefulness of objectives. First, justify the organization. The objectives indicate the purpose and aims and thereby the social justification for the existence of an organization. Second, provide direction. Objectives provide direction for the functioning of an organization. When objectives are clear, the aims of the activities of different people in the organization converge for the achievement of the common purpose. Third, basis for management by objectives. Clearly formulated objectives form the basis for management by objectives, which is a way of management for results. Fourth, help strategic planning management. Strategic planning management is indeed a means to achieve the objectives. Objectives thus help effective functioning of the organization in a given environment. Fifth, help coordination. According to Gleck, objectives help coordinate decisions and decision makers by directing and attention of employees to desirable standards of behavior. It may reduce conflicts in decision making if all employees know what the objectives are. Objectives become constraint on decisions. Six, provide standards for assessments and control. Objectives, by making clear what the result should be, provide the basis for control and assessment of organizational performance. Without objectives, the organization has no objective basis for evaluating its success. Seventh, help decentralization. Objectives help decentralization effective by making clear the organizational objectives to various elements in the organization. Decentralization, by assigning decision-making to lower-level personnel, gives a subordinate executive or operator considerable leeway in deciding how to perform his work. Turning people loose in this way will result in chaos unless the common objectives are well understood. Guidelines for ideal objectives in an organization. 1. Participation. To the extent possible, formulation of objectives should involve the participation of important people responsible for the achievement of the objectives. The sense of participation will provide motivation and a moral responsibility for the achievement objectives. 2. Clarity. Objectives should not be vague and ambiguous. They should be spelled out clearly. Further, they should be made clearly known to the people who work for their accomplishment. 3. Realism. Objectives should be realistic with regards to the internal and external environments. They should be reasonable in the sense that they should be achievable with the best efforts, given the environment. At the same time, they should be high enough to elicit the full utilization of the company's resources and skills. 4. Flexibility. Objectives should not be very rigid. They should be flexible. That is, changes in the environment and or changes in the organizational strengths and weaknesses may call for modification to the objectives. For example, objectives can grow obsolete because of the continuous changes occurring in the company's environment. A company should therefore will provide for flexibility to suitably modify the objectives when changes in environment call for their modification. 5. Consistency. Objectives should be mutually consistent throughout the organization. That is, all objectives within the organization should support the overall enterprise objectives. 6. Ranking. An organization with multiple objectives should assign relative priorities and indicate the time horizon within which to attain each of the objectives. 7. Verifiability. Objectives should be capable of being verified or measured. For example, an objective like reasonable profit may be subject to subjective interpretations, and hence the actual performance can be verified specifically. On the other hand, an objective like a 15% return on investment is verifiable. 8. Balance. There should be an appropriate balance between the different objectives of an organization. For example, there should be a proper balance between profitability, employee welfare, customer welfare, community welfare, etc. Undue emphasis on one may adversely affect others. Factors affecting objectives. Objectives are not formulated in a vacuum. According again to Gleck, who asserts the objectives are formulated by the top managers in a firm, the choice of objectives are affected by three factors, namely forces in the environment, internal forces, and the value systems of top executives. Factors in the environment. There are numbers of environmental factors which influence business decisions. For example, an external factor like the government policy may affect the objectives of a company. Internal forces. Formulation objectives is affected also by internal factors or the realities of enterprise resources and internal power relationships. Enterprise resources are undoubtedly a factor which decides the objectives. Similarly, formulation of objectives are also influenced by the internal power relationships, which include factors like the extent of shareholders' confidence and support the top management enjoys and employer-employee relations. 3. The value systems of the top executives. The value systems of top executives affect the formulation of objectives. For example, the Articles of Association of Tata Iron and Steel Company, or TISCO, was amended at the initiative of the powers that be to incorporate the provision regarding the company's social and moral responsibilities to customers, employees, shareholders, society, and the local community. Profit objective, business practices, corporate citizenship, etc. are obviously affected by the value systems of the top executive. Hierarchy of objectives. Organizations with a hierarchical structure that is with different levels of management like top level, middle level, and lower level normally have a hierarchy of objectives to be pursued at different levels. At the peak of the hierarchy is the organizational mission, which is the shaped by the vision and values of the promoters, expectations of the shareholders, and environmental forces. Below the mission is the overall objectives of the organization or the corporate objectives, which are long-range or strategic objectives. The corporate objectives are to be formulated and pursued by the board of directors and topmost managers. The overall objectives lead to the next level of the hierarchy, which consists of more specific objectives such as those in the key results areas, such as certain percent return on investment or certain percentage increase in the market share over a certain period of time. In a multi-SBU organization, the next level in the hierarchy is the SBU objectives. The divisional objectives are then formed on the basis of the SBU objectives or a strategic business unit is an operating divisions of a firm which serves a distinct product market segment or a well-defined set of customers or a geographic area. The SBU is given authority to make its own strategic decisions within corporate guidelines as long as it meets the corporate objectives. There are different factors which decide SBUs. Each product line or a group of related product lines may from an SBU. Nature of SBUs may be influenced by factors such as the volume of business, future plans, market characteristics, and etc. Below the divisional objectives are the departmental objectives. That is the objectives for the different departments like production, marketing, finance, personnel, research and development, and etc., which help to achieve the corporate objectives. A department may have several sections or units under it. For example, the marketing department may have several geographical divisions like Northern, Southern, Eastern, and Western, or product group divisions like product A, B, and Z, and etc. Each such section will have its own objectives will contribute to the achievement of the department objectives. Each section may have several personnel responsible for the achievement of the sectional objectives. For example, marketing subdivision may have under its several salesmen, each of whom will have to achieve a specific objective, like a sales target. A hierarchical organization, thus a hierarchy of objectives, and the objectives of the different levels are designed to help achieve the overall organizational objectives. Classification of organizational objectives. Broadly, there are two classes of objectives, namely economic objectives and social objectives. Some of the social economic objectives are so intertwined that it is difficult to separate them, and it may be more appropriate to describe them as socio-economic objectives. However, the following may be regarded as the important economic objectives of business. 1. Survival. The primary objective of the every business is to stay in business, is an often quoted statement. The growing magnitude of an industrial sickness is a clear indication of the need for primary trust on this objective. Constant monitoring of the business environment and strategic planning are needed for survival in a competitive environment. A business cannot obviously achieve its objectives unless it survives and has hence survival is a basic objective necessary to achieve other objectives. For many organizations, the objective of maximizing profit is a luxury for management and shareholders alike. The overriding problem is simply to stay in business. 2. Return on investment. A return on investment is undoubtedly an important economic objective not only for private enterprises but also for many public sector enterprises. Private business is often profit motivated. However, the level of profit a private enterprise aims at is likely to be influenced by its social outlook and a number of environmental factors like government policy, attitude of society, competitive and other conditions of the industry, and etc. 3. Growth. Growth over time is also an economic objective of most of the business enterprises. A business may grow either vertically, horizontally, or by diversification into unrelated areas. Growth may benefit not only the promoters and shareholders, but also the consumers, suppliers, and the national economy. Growth is not merely an objective, but also a natural or of a dynamic enterprise. 4. Innovation. According to Peter Drucker, there is only one valid definition of business purpose: to create a customer, and because its purpose is to create a customer, the business enterprises has two and only two basic functions: marketing and innovation. Marketing and innovation produce results. All the rest are costs. Drucker, who interprets innovation as the provision of different economic satisfactions, argues that it is not enough for the business to provide just any economic goods and services. It must provide better and more economic ones. It is not necessary for the business to grow bigger, but it is necessary that it constantly grows better. 5. Market share. An increase in or maintenance of its market share is an important objective of many companies. Several companies also strive for market leadership. Sometimes, non-economic factors like the prestige and industry recognition associated with market leadership may be a more prominent factor than the economic factor which drives a company towards market leadership. Some companies also strive to attain market leadership even at cost of profit maximization. Social objectives. There has been a growing recognition of the social objectives and responsibilities of business. Barker aptly describes the situation as follows. Business traditionally has been responsible for quantities, for the supply of goods and jobs, for costs, prices, wages, hours of work, and standards of living. Today, however, business is being asked to take on responsibility for the quality of life in our society. The expectation is that business, in addition to its traditional accountability for economic performance and results, will concern itself with the health of the society, that it will come up with the cures for the ills that currently beset us, and indeed will find ways of anticipating and preventing future problems in these areas. Comparison between economic objectives and social objectives. 1. Economic objectives are primarily concerned with the economic health of the enterprise, while social objectives are concerned with the needs and welfare of the society. 2. Economics objectives serve the economic motive of the stockholders. On the other hand, social objectives serve the interests of the society. 3. Economic objectives are mostly enterprise-oriented or enterprise-centered, while social objectives are social-oriented. 4. Economic objectives are important both in the short and long term. On the other hand, the perspective of social objectives is mostly long term. 5. Achievement of economic objective is necessary for the survival and growth of the enterprise, while on social objectives justify the survival and growth of the enterprise. 6. Achievement of economic objective is necessary for the effective discharge of social objectives. On the other hand, social objectives justify economic objectives. 7. There is general agreement as to what constitute economic objectives, while there are differences of opinion as to what constitute social objectives. 8. Economic objectives are tangible, differ from several of the social objectives are not tangible. 9. Economic objectives by themselves may benefit society, as some of the social objectives reinforce the achievement of economic objectives. 10. Economic objectives are cardinal, differ from social objectives are ordinal. 11. Economic objectives are basic objectives, while economic objectives provide the base for pursuing social objectives. 12. Economic objectives are clear and definite, while social objectives may have ambiguity. To sum up the comparison, most of economic objectives were used by the public sectors, while most of all social objectives favors in private organization. Social objectives of business may be grouped into three broad categories. 1. objectives which protect consumer interest. 2. Objectives which protect the interests of workers. 3. Objectives which protect the interests of the society. So this enters CSR if you are familiar from it, corporate social responsibility whereby companies integrate social and environment concerns. Reconciliation of social and economic objectives. We have seen that social and economic objectives encompass promoting the interests of different categories of people like the shareholders, workers, consumers, local population, and the general public. The economic and social objectives may conflict with each other. Again, some of the social objectives may conflict with each other. Furthering economic objectives may constrain some of the social objectives. For example, some of the efforts to increase the profit may adversely affect consumers if that result in the price increase. Similarly, profit motive may harm workers' interests in some cases. Fulfillment of some of the social objectives may adversely affect the economic objectives. For example, enhanced expenditure on labor welfare, pollution control, social service, etc., may eat into the profit. This could also affect consumer interest if they cause an increase in prices. It is therefore necessary to reconcile the conflicting objectives or to achieve a proper trade-off between the different objectives. In other words, proper balance between the conflicting interests of the different groups should be struck. And that just about covers it. Thank you.